She was told to stand back. So she stood back for exactly 4 seconds. Then the monitor flatlined, the doctors froze, the federal agents started arguing about authorization, and Lena Carter made a decision that would destroy everything she'd spent 2 years quietly building. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. 30 seconds later, a man was alive who shouldn't have been. In 60 seconds after that, she was fired. But that's not the story. The story starts when the black SUVs arrived. Subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The first thing anyone noticed about Lena Carter was that she never made noise. Not the good kind of quiet, not the shy, head down, first week on the job quiet that most new nurses carried like a nervous habit. This was something else, something deliberate, like a person who had decided at some point in their life that the less space they occupied, the better. She came in early. She left on time. She did exactly what she was told, no more, no less. She kept her locker clean. She never personalized her badge. She didn't have lunch with the other nurses, not because she was unfriendly, but because she always seemed to be watching, cataloging, measuring, running some invisible checklist in her head that nobody else could see. Charge nurse Deborah Haynes had been at Riverside Memorial for 19 years, and in 19 years, she had developed what she privately called her trouble radar. It was not a talent she advertised. She'd simply been around long enough to recognize the two kinds of new hires who eventually caused problems, the ones who thought they knew everything, and the ones who actually knew too much and were hiding it. Lena Carter, from the moment she walked through those ER doors 2 months ago, had been firmly in the second category. She's precise, one of the attendings Dr. Marcus Webb had mentioned in passing during the second week. It wasn't a compliment exactly, it was an observation wrapped around a question mark. Too precise, like she's seen this before. She's a nurse, Deborah had said. Precision is the trauma. No, Marcus had said. Precision is when someone does something correctly. What she does is different. She anticipates. Before I call for something, it's already in her hand. Before a patient's pressure drops on the monitor, she's already at the bedside. You don't learn that in nursing school, Deb. You learn that somewhere else. Deborah had filed that conversation away and said nothing more about it, until the morning of October 14th, when everything changed. It started like any other chaotic Tuesday. The ER at Riverside Memorial was already a battlefield before 7 a.m. 3 car accident victims from the interstate, a diabetic crisis in Bay 4, a 60-year-old man who decided that chest pain was probably just stress and waited 3 days before his wife finally drove him in, furious and terrified in equal measure. Lena moved through all of it with that same eerie calm, helping, observing, never stepping beyond the invisible lines she'd drawn around herself. At 7:42 a.m., she was restocking the supply cart near Base 7 when she heard the sound. Not a patient sound, not a medical sound, the sound of boots, a lot of them, moving in a very specific way, not the shuffling half-run of hospital staff, not the clomping uncertainty of visitors. These were measured, deliberate, trained footsteps, the kind of footsteps that come from people who've been taught to move as a unit. Lena's hands stopped moving on the supply cart. She didn't turn around right away. She counted instead. 4 sets, no 5. Spread formation, she noted without entirely meaning to. Entry team, not escort. They weren't protecting someone. They were containing a situation. She turned around. 5 men in dark suits, not cheap suits, not government-issued wrinkle-wear, but the kind of controlled, nondescript professional clothing that said, "We are here and you will not remember our faces," were pushing a gurney through the ER doors. The man on the gurney was in his late 60s, heavy-set, gray-haired, with the kind of jaw that looked like it had been carved from stubbornness. He was conscious barely, and his breathing was the kind that made the air sound expensive, labored, shallow, every exhale working twice as hard as it should. Behind the gurney, 2 more men, different from the first 5 younger, standing slightly back, kept their eyes moving in a pattern Lena recognized immediately. A sweep, sector by sector. They weren't looking for threats from outside. They were making sure no one inside had a reason to get close. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared from nowhere, as he always did when something serious came through the doors. "What have we got?" he asked, falling into step beside the gurney. One of the suited men, the one closest to the patient's head, who carried himself like the man whose job it was to speak first, turned to Marcus and said in a voice that was professionally pleasant and completely immovable, "Chest trauma, possible pneumothorax. He needs to be stabilized." "Who is he?" "That information is classified." Marcus stopped walking for exactly 1 second. Then he kept moving. "I need a name for the chart. You'll receive authorization shortly. Right now he needs—" "I know what he needs," Marcus said, and his voice had gone flat and clinical. The tone Lena had heard him use when he was done negotiating and starting to work. "Bay 2, everybody else step back." Lena watched from her position near the supply cart. She should have gone back to work. She had 3 other patients to check on. She had paperwork. She had a diabetic in Bay 4 who needed his insulin adjusted. She stayed where she was. Because something was wrong, not just the obvious, something the federal escort, the classified identity, the way the suited men moved like they'd already run this scenario in their heads and were now executing a plan. Those things were unusual but not alarming. People with power got sick too. They got hurt too. Sometimes they arrived with security and bureaucracy wrapped around them like armor. No. What was wrong was the patient's color. She could see it from 15 feet away through the controlled chaos of the bay, past the moving bodies and the equipment cart being wheeled into position. His color was wrong. The ashen bluish cast that crept from the edges of his lips, not gray like a cardiac event, not flushed like infection. This was the specific, terrible blue of a lung that was losing its battle. Pneumothorax, the agent had said. Lena knew exactly what that meant. Blood and air trapped in the pleural cavity, collapsing the lung from the inside, pushing the heart sideways with each breath. She also had known from the moment she heard his breathing from across the room that he was moving faster toward collapse than anyone in that bay had yet registered. She took 1 step forward, and Deborah Haynes appeared at her elbow like a ghost. "Carter," Lena stopped. "You're on restocking this shift. Bay 2 is Dr. Webb's." His breathing is Dr. Webb's concern. Deborah's voice was not unkind. It was, in fact, the voice of someone who had drawn this line before and was drawing it again with great care. "You're 2 months in. You observe. You assist when asked. You do not walk into a federal patient situation and start making clinical calls. Do you understand?" Lena looked at her. Then at the bay, then back at her. "Yes," she said. "I understand." She meant it. She went back to the supply cart. For 4 minutes and 17 seconds, she stocked shelves. She counted. She was aware that she was counting, aware that the counting was a behavior she'd developed somewhere. She didn't think about a way of keeping herself grounded when the part of her brain that was built for action started overriding the part that was built for appropriate civilian behavior in a professional setting. 4 minutes. She could hear Marcus working in Bay 2, could hear the calm efficiency of the team around him, the resident calling out vitals, the nurse handing instruments, the quiet mechanical language of a trauma assessment proceeding correctly, but not fast enough. At 4 minutes and 22 seconds, the monitor changed pitch. It was a subtle change, the kind that most people, even most medical people, might not have caught immediately in the noise and motion of a busy ER. The rhythm shifted by a fraction. The interval between beats became just slightly irregular, not in the chaotic way of a failing heart, but in the specific, quiet, terrifying way of a heart being compressed. Tension pneumothorax, not just pneumothorax anymore. Air had built up faster than the blood, and now it was doing what tension pneumothorax did. It was pushing the trachea, pushing the mediastinum, pushing the heart to the right, and squeezing the major vessels. He had minutes. Less if no one moved. Marcus was still completing the assessment, still working through protocol, still waiting for the authorization that the suited men kept promising was coming. Lena set down the IV bag she was holding. "Carter," Deborah started, but Lena was already moving. She didn't run, she walked. Fast, direct, purposeful, the walk of someone who is not asking for permission, but is also not trying to start a war. She came around the edge of Bay 2 with her hands already moving, already calculating, her eyes running the patient in the way that she had trained herself to never run patients here in this place because it gave too much away. "Tension pneumothorax," she said, not loudly, not dramatically, Just stated it the way you state a fact that everyone in the room needs to have immediately. He's shifted tracheal deviation is starting. You have about 90 seconds before he arrests. Marcus looked up from the chart. The resident froze. The suited man nearest the bay took one step forward. You need to step back. 14-gauge needle, Lena said to the nurse behind the supply cart who was staring at her with wide eyes. Second intercostal space mid-clavicular line. Right now. Nobody touches this patient without... The suit started. Sir, Lena said, and she turned and looked at him directly for the first time, and something in her face, not her voice, not her posture, something behind her eyes made him stop mid-sentence. That man is 45 seconds from cardiac arrest. You can shoot me after. The agent's jaw tightened. He stepped back. The nurse handed Lena the needle. What happened in the next 30 seconds was something that the people in that room would describe differently depending on who you asked. The resident said later that he had never seen anyone move like that outside of a surgical suite. Not fast, precise. Each movement landing exactly where it needed to land, no wasted motion, no hesitation, no checking and rechecking. The needle went in at the exact right angle, at the exact right location with the exact right pressure. The nurse said she felt the room change, like a pressure drop before a storm, only in reverse, like something releasing. Marcus Webb said nothing for a long time when people asked. Then he said, "She knew before the monitor knew. That's not training. That's experience." The monitor said everything else. The erratic compressing rhythm stabilized, not perfectly, not dramatically, just stabilized, evened out, began slowly to return to something that looked like it might keep going. The patient exhaled, ragged, desperate, and then steadier. His eyes opened, cloudy, confused, but open. He looked up at the ceiling. Then for just a moment, his eyes found Lena's face. She looked back at him. Just for a second. Then she stepped away from the bed, set the needle in the sharps container, and turned to face the consequences. Deborah was standing at the entrance to Bay 2. She wasn't looking at the patient. She wasn't looking at the monitor. She was looking at Lena with an expression that was not quite shock and not quite understanding, but something in the territory between them, where things are starting to rearrange themselves into a different shape. Marcus was looking at Lena too. So were the federal agents, all 5 of them in a row, with expressions that had shifted from contained professional authority to something more complicated. They were conferring quietly, quickly, in the practiced way of people who communicate without wanting to be heard. The suited man who had told her to step back was speaking into a small device. His eyes didn't leave her. Lena stood in the middle of the bay and waited, because she knew. She had known from the moment she picked up that needle. She had done the calculation, the same one she'd been doing all her life, cost versus consequence, and she had made the choice, and now the accounting was coming. It always came. Dr. Webb took a breath. He looked at the stabilized patient. He looked at the chart in his hand. He looked at the needle that had saved a man's life. Then he looked at Lena, and his voice was very quiet and very careful. "That was my patient, Carter." "Yes," she said. "You were not authorized to perform that procedure." "No," she said, "I wasn't." He paused. Something moved across his face, something that looked for a moment almost like admiration. Then it was Ginner replaced with the flat, neutral mask of institutional authority. "I need you to step out of the bay." She nodded. She had expected exactly that. She walked out without another word. Deborah met her in the hallway. "I'm going to have to report this," Deborah said, and she didn't sound satisfied about it. She sounded tired. "You know that." "I know," Lena said. "You performed an invasive procedure without authorization, without attending supervision on a classified federal patient. He was dying." "Lena," Deborah stopped, lowered her voice. "I know he was dying. I'm not arguing about whether you were right. I'm telling you what the institution requires. I'm telling you that what you did, no matter what the outcome is, textbook insubordination under this hospital's protocols, under CMS guidelines, under..." "I know," Lena said again, softer this time. Deborah looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that is trying to read something that isn't quite on the surface. "Where did you learn to do that?" Lena said nothing. "That wasn't a textbook technique," Deborah said slowly. "That was..." "Are you suspending me?" Lena asked. Deborah closed her mouth, pressed her lips together, then, I'm referring this to administration. I think you should call HR before they call you. She walked away. Lena didn't call HR. She waited. It took 12 minutes. The administrator who came for her was a man named Gerald Park, who handled compliance and whose entire professional demeanor communicated that he had been woken up early for this and was deeply unhappy about it. He had a folder. He had printed paperwork. He had the particular efficiency of someone executing a decision that had already been made by people above his pay grade. Lena Carter, he said, even though he clearly knew exactly who she was. Yes, she said, I need you to come with me. She went with him. In a small conference room off the main corridor, with a security officer standing near the door and Gerald Park sitting across from her with his folder open, Lena received the following information: that her actions in Bay 2 constituted gross insubordination, that her actions represented an unauthorized invasive medical procedure performed without attending supervision on a federal patient, creating both legal and security liability for Riverside Memorial. That effective immediately her employment at Riverside Memorial was terminated, that her nursing license would be referred to the state board for review, that she was to surrender her access badge and be escorted from the premises. Gerald Park delivered this information in a flat, practiced voice, and at no point did he look up from his folder. Lena listened to all of it. She did not argue. She did not cry. She did not slam her hand on the table or raise her voice or do any of the things that the part of her that was tired and human and had worked very hard to build this quiet, ordinary life wanted very badly to do. She took off her badge. She set it on the table. She stood up. The man in Bay 2, she said, he's going to need a chest tube within the next 20 minutes. The needle bought time. It didn't fix the underlying hemorrhage. Gerald Park blinked. That's not. Tell Dr. Webb, she said. 20 minutes. She walked out. The security officer who escorted her out was young, early 20s, knew still uncomfortable with the official nature of the task. He kept apologizing in small ways, holding doors, saying things like, I'm sorry about this, and this is just procedure, in a tone that suggested he was genuinely troubled by the situation and didn't know what else to offer. Lena didn't make it harder for him. She walked steadily, kept her hands visible, gave back her locker key when he asked for it. In the locker room, she changed out of her scrubs into the plain gray clothes she kept in her bag. She moved quickly, not because she was afraid, but because there is a particular humiliation in taking too long to leave a place that has just told you to go. She was almost done when she heard it, a voice low and female coming from behind the row of lockers. Carter. She turned. It was Nurse Angie Reeves, older 20 years on the job, the kind of woman who had seen enough to know the difference between someone making a mistake and someone making a sacrifice. She was standing with her arms crossed and her jaw set and her eyes doing something complicated. That man in there, Angie said, he's alive because of you. Lena looked at her. He might still die, but not in the next hour. Angie paused. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen people hesitate. I've seen people freeze. I've seen people stand there and watch the monitor, like if they stare at it long enough, someone else will fix it. Her voice dropped. I have never in 20 years seen someone move the way you moved in that bay. Lena picked up her bag. Where did you learn that? Angie asked. The same question Deborah had asked, said with the same something underneath it. Not suspicion, not accusation, something closer to recognition. Take care of yourself, Angie, Lena said. She walked out. The parking lot in the morning was the specific kind of ordinary that feels like cruelty when you're the person walking through it under bad circumstances. Cars pulling in, people arriving for shifts, a food truck setting up near the east entrance, a woman on her phone laughing at something, the whole morning just continuing, indifferent. Lena reached her car, a 10-year-old Civic Gray, nothing about it remarkable. She unlocked it and stood for a moment with her hand on the door handle and did not get in. She didn't want to get in. Getting in meant driving away. Driving away meant this was over, this version of things, the version where she was Lena Carter, ER nurse, quiet and precise and invisible, living in a 2-bedroom apartment near the hospital, with a plant she watered on Sundays, and a neighbor named Mrs. Okafor who brought her jollof rice sometimes and asked no questions. That version was done now. She had ended it herself in 30 seconds, with a 14-gauge needle and a decision that her body had made before her brain could argue. She pressed her forehead against the top of the car door, just for a second. Just 1 second of being the person who was tired and alone and had just destroyed the only quiet life she'd been able to build in 3 years. Then she straightened up. She pulled in a breath. She started to get in the car, and then she heard the sound. Not boots this time. Engines. Multiple engines moving in concert coming from the south entrance of the parking lot. She looked up. 5 black SUVs, moving in formation, deliberate controlled spacing. The kind of formation that is not accidental, not coincidental, not the result of 5 separate drivers arriving at the same time. They were coming here. They were coming for her. Lena did not move. She stood with her hand on her car door and watched them come and felt somewhere in the part of her that she had spent 3 years trying to bury something shift. Not fear, something older than fear. Recognition. The SUVs fanned out 2 on each side and 1 directly in front of her car, cutting off any exit without being aggressive about it. The doors opened in near-perfect synchrony, all of them at once, and 8 men stepped out. Not the same men from inside the hospital. Different. Older. Harder. They wore the same controlled, nondescript professionalism, but these men carried themselves in a way that said they had been doing this since before the hospital agents were in training. They spread out with the quiet efficiency of people who are very good at their tasks and feel no need to announce it, and then they stopped. All of them. And they stood there in a loose perimeter around Lena's car, and they waited. Not reaching for anything, not advancing, not speaking, just waiting. Lena looked at the man nearest her, middle-aged, steady eyes, the kind of stillness that isn't passive. "Ms. Carter," he said, not a question, a confirmation. She looked at him for a long moment. "What took you so long?" she said. And something moved across his face, brief, controlled, almost not there. Almost. He stepped aside and nodded toward the hospital doors. Inside, the ER had gone quiet in the particular way that emergency rooms do when the people who work in them sense that something is happening that is outside the normal range of emergency. Staff had drifted toward the main corridor, not dramatically, not in a crowd, but in that gradual orbital way of professionals who are trying to observe something while pretending they aren't. They watched Lena Carter walk back through the doors she had just been escorted out of. Not alone, flanked. 8 men in formation bringing her back, and not the way you bring back someone who has been apprehended. The way you bring back someone who belongs there, who was always supposed to be their heir and is now being returned to the right place. Deborah Haynes stood at the nurse's station, a chart in her hand, and watched. Gerald Parks stood near the administrative quarter folder, still in hand, and watched. Dr. Marcus Webb stood at the entrance to Bay 2 and watched. And in Bay 2, barely visible through the glass, the patient, stabilized, the chest tube and now the hemorrhage being addressed, the monitors running a rhythm that was careful and steady and alive. His eyes were open. He was watching too. Lena didn't look at any of them. She walked straight ahead, her face composed, her hands steady, carrying 2 months of quiet and ordinary and carefully chosen invisibility toward whatever was waiting for her at the end of that hallway. And the question that was on every face in that ER that nobody had spoken yet, that sat in the air like something about to break, hung over all of it. Who is she? The hallway was the longest 40 feet Lena Carter had ever walked, not because she was afraid. Fear was something she had made her peace with a long time ago, in places where 40 feet was the difference between a firefight and an extraction, where every step had a cost, and you paid it anyway because the alternative was worse. No, the hallway was long because of the silence. And the silence was made entirely of people who were trying very hard to look like they weren't watching her. She could feel every single one of them. Deborah at the nurse's station, holding that chart like a prop. Gerald Park frozen near the administrative corridor, his folder still open, his expression doing something between confusion and the dawning horror of a man who suspects he has made a very serious mistake. The resident from Bay 2, Dr. Yoon, standing near the supply cart with a blood pressure cuff dangling forgotten from his hand. 3 nurses in a cluster near the break room door who had clearly been heading somewhere else and had simply stopped. All of them watching, none of them speaking. And behind Lena, the 8 men in their contained professional silence moving with her at a distance that was close enough to be unmistakable, but far enough not to be threatening. An escort, not a capture. A return, not an arrest. The difference mattered. She could feel it mattering in the room around her. She kept walking. The man who had spoken to her in the parking lot, she had already cataloged him as the lead. The one with the steady eyes and the brief, controlled, almost expression, moved up alongside her at the ER entrance and matched her pace without looking at her. "There's a room being prepared," he said quietly. "Administrator's conference room, second floor. Someone is coming to speak with you." "Who?" she asked. "You'll know when you see him." She looked at him sideways. "That's either reassuring or deeply alarming." "In my experience," he said, "it tends to be both." She almost smiled. She didn't. They kept walking. Gerald Park found his voice somewhere between the corridor and the elevator bank. He appeared at Lena's left shoulder, slightly breathless, clutching his folder with both hands now. "Ms. Carter, I need to clarify the termination paperwork there is a process here, and whatever federal involvement may be occurring, this hospital still operates under Gerald." The lead agent didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply said the name, and something in the way he said it communicated a very complete and efficient message about Gerald Park's current position in the hierarchy of this situation. Gerald stopped walking. Lena kept going. She heard him behind her, a small strangled exhale, the sound of a man recalibrating everything he thought he understood about his Tuesday morning. The elevator opened. She stepped in. 4 of the agents came with her. The doors closed. In the elevator, nobody spoke. Lena looked at the floor indicator. 1, Ushpan. 2, the doors opened. Chatham. The administrator's conference room on the second floor was the kind of room that existed to make decisions in. Long table, too many chairs, the particular stillness of a space that had absorbed 100 difficult conversations and was waiting for another one. 2 of the agents positioned themselves near the door. 2 more stood along the far wall. The lead agent gestured toward a chair at the center of the table. Lena sat. She didn't cross her arms. She didn't lean back. She put her hands flat on the table and looked straight ahead and waited the way she had learned to wait, not passive, not tense, but gathered. Present. The door opened 3 minutes later. The woman who walked in was not who Lena had expected. She was in her mid-40s, civilian clothes, the kind of lean efficiency that comes from years of moving through spaces where being underestimated is an asset. She had dark hair, cut short, a leather portfolio under one arm, and the expression of someone who had already read every file in this building and found them insufficient. She sat down across from Lena, opened the portfolio, looked at it briefly, and then looked up. "How's the hand?" she asked. Lena blinked, just once. "Fine. The needle technique you use, second intercostal midclavicular, 15-degree angle on entry. That's not standard protocol." She paused. "That's forward operating procedure. Specifically, it's the modification developed for the 75th Ranger Medic program, modified again by a SEAL team medical specialist around 2018. She tilted her head. "You want to tell me how a civilian ER nurse knows a classified field modification to a field procedure?" Lena said nothing. The woman let the silence sit for exactly 5 seconds. Then, "My name is Sandra Cho. I work for an agency whose name you don't need yet. I'm not here to prosecute you, and I'm not here to protect you, not officially. I'm here because the man downstairs is alive, and the people who care about him want to understand why." "He was in tension pneumothorax," Lena said. The needle decompressed. "I know what the needle did. I'm asking how you knew to do it before the monitor caught the shift." Another silence. "Lena." Sandra's voice dropped, not softer, closer, like she was stepping across a distance she'd been keeping deliberately. "I've read your the file you think exists, 2 years of nursing school clinical rotations, Riverside Memorial. That file." She paused. "And the other one?" Lena's hands flat on the table didn't move, but something behind her eyes did. "There it is," Sandra said quietly, not triumphantly, not unkindly, just noting it, the way you note a reaction that confirms something you already knew. "Why are you here?" Lena asked. Her voice was steady. Everything else was working very hard to stay that way. "Because someone knew you'd be in that ER. Someone knew he'd be brought there. And someone wants to know if that's a coincidence or a plan." Sandra held her gaze. "The question I need you to answer is, which side of that are you on?" Before Lena could answer, the door opened again. Not one of the agents this time. A man in his late 50s, tall in a charcoal suit that wore the particular wrinkles of someone who had been traveling for many hours and had not stopped for anything as inconvenient as a change of clothes. He had the face of a man who was used to being the most important person in any given room and had stopped finding that interesting decades ago. He looked at Sandra first, then at Lena. Something happened in his expression. Brief, controlled. "Give us the room," he said. Sandra looked at him for a moment. Then she closed her portfolio, stood and left without a word. The agents near the wall followed. The lead agent paused at the door, looked at the man, received a small nod, and pulled the door shut behind him. Lena and the man were alone. He sat down, not across from her, at the corner of the table, closer in the way of someone who doesn't want distance right now. He folded his hands. He looked at her with the specific weight of a person who has something to say and has been carrying it for a long time. "You look like her," he said. "Your mother around the eyes." Lena's entire body went still. "You knew her," she said. Not a question. "I served with your father," he said, 26 years ago, before you were born." He paused. "My name is—" "I know who you are," she said. He looked at her. "Rear Admiral Thomas Garrett," she said. "Naval Special Warfare Command. You ran the program my father was recruited into in 1997. You were the one who authorized the mission in 2009 that he didn't come home from." Her voice was flat, factual, precise. The same precision she brought to everything. "I've known who you are since I was 19 years old." Something moved across Garrett's face. Not guilt exactly. Something older and harder to name. The particular expression of a man confronting a debt he's been aware of for a long time. "Then you know," he said, "that I owe you." "I don't want what you owe," Lena said. "No, I know." He was quiet for a moment. "I know that too." Downstairs, the ER had not returned to normal. Dr. Marcus Webb was doing what competent physicians do under pressure, continuing to work, continuing to manage, continuing to make the decisions that needed making. But his mind was not entirely on the chart in front of him. It was on the woman who had walked back through those doors, flanked by federal agents, and ascended somehow into the upper floors of a hospital that she had been fired from 20 minutes ago. He stopped outside Bay 2. The patient was stable. The chest tube was draining correctly. The vitals were holding. The patient was awake. Marcus pushed through the glass door and approached the bed. "How are you feeling, madam?" he asked in the practiced, measured tone of an attending physician checking on a post-procedure patient. The man in the bed looked at him with gray eyes that were clearer than they had any right to be for someone who had been in shock an hour ago. "The woman," he said. His voice was rough, scraped clean by effort. "I'm sorry, the nurse." He stopped, steadied his breathing. "The one who—" He made a small motion with 2 fingers. The motion of someone mimicking a needle going in. Marcus hesitated. She's been removed from the floor." The man's eyes sharpened. "Where is she?" "Sir, you really shouldn't be—" "Where, Uri?" It was not a request. It was the voice of a man who had spent his entire adult life speaking in a register that expected to be obeyed, and even lying in a hospital bed bleeding and medicated, he had not lost it. Marcus said carefully, "I believe she's on the 2nd floor." The man exhaled slowly, nodded once the way you nod when a piece of information slots into a place you already had prepared for it. "Good," he said. Marcus waited for more. More didn't come. He walked back out. In the hallway, Angie Reeves was waiting, not for him specifically, but in that way she had of existing near important things. She looked at Marcus with a question she hadn't shaped into words yet. "He asked about her," Marcus said quietly. Angie said nothing. That man, Marcus said more to himself than to her, knows exactly who she is. Damn. Upstairs, Admiral Garrett leaned forward slightly in his chair. "You applied to Riverside Memorial under a modified resume," he said. "Nursing degree from State is real. You earned it in 14 months, which is remarkable but not impossible. The clinical hours are real. What's not real is everything before 2021. He paused. "Everything before you walked out of a naval hospital in Bethesda and disappeared." "I didn't disappear," Lena said. "I left. You left without completing your separation process. You left without a debriefing. You left with—" I left, she said, because there was nothing left for me to complete a separation from. Her voice was still controlled, still level, but something underneath it had shifted a fault line fine and deep. The team was gone. The mission file was classified until 2045. The only thing the Navy wanted from me at that point was my signature on a document saying that everything I'd seen and done and lost had never happened. She stopped, breathed. So I left. Garrett was quiet. I built something, she said. Quietly, it wasn't much. It was small and ordinary, and nobody needed anything from me that I couldn't give. She looked at him directly. And then this morning happened. Yes, he said, this morning happened. Who told you I was here? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. Garrett. She put something into his name, not aggression, but weight. The weight of a person who has done enough hard things to know when they're being handled and when they're being told the truth. Someone placed that patient in my ER. Someone routed him specifically to Riverside Memorial when there are 3 level 1 trauma centers closer to the highway he was traveling on. Someone put him on my floor in my bay within range of my eyes and my hands. She leaned forward slightly. That's not coincidence. That's engineering. He met her gaze. No, he said. It's not. The room was very still. The Admiral downstairs, Lena said slowly. He's not just a patient. No, he's bait. Garrett's jaw tightened. He's a target. There's a difference. He didn't know the intelligence we had indicated a potential threat during transport, but He stopped, pressed his mouth together. We underestimated the timing. The chest trauma happened before we could get the primary medical team in place, and the closest facility with a trauma-qualified team was Riverside. And you knew I was at Riverside. We knew. How long? A pause. 6 months, he said. Lena sat back. Something moved through her, not quite anger, not quite surprise. The specific feeling of a person who has suspected something for a while and is now receiving the confirmation and finding that confirmation worse than the suspicion. 6 months, she said. You've been watching me for 6 months. Monitoring, not watching. Don't. Her voice was quiet and absolute. Don't tell me there's a difference right now. He stopped. She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds, then opened them. Why today, she asked. Why not 6 months ago? Why not a year ago? Why send a federal patient to my ER and let me blow my cover and lose my job? She caught herself, slowed down. Why today? Garrett put his hands on the table. Because we needed to know, he said, whether you still had it. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. 3 years out, he said, under a civilian identity, no active training, we needed to know whether you'd freeze, whether you'd prioritize your cover over the patient, whether the instinct was still there, or whether it had gone quiet. He held her gaze. It hadn't gone quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. You used a man's life, she said carefully, to test me. We put a man whose life was already in danger in a position where the best possible outcome required you to act. He didn't flinch. Yes. She stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam a chair or put her hands on the table. She simply stood and looked at him and let him see exactly what she thought of that, not in anger, but in the still, clear, precise way she brought to everything. The way that was somehow worse than anger. You should go check on your Admiral, she said. Lena, I'm not your asset, Garrett. I resigned, medically, with full documentation. She picked up her bag from the floor beside the chair. Whatever you came here to start today, I'm not interested. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the handle. Petty Officer First Class Elena Reyes, Garrett said. She stopped. Her hand stayed on the handle. Her back stayed to him, but she stopped. That's your real name, he said quietly. Not Lena Carter, Elena Reyes. Special Warfare Combat Medics SEAL Team 8-3 deployments, 47 documented, confirmed saves under combat conditions. He paused. Recipient of the Navy Cross classified. Recipient of the Purple Heart classified. Another pause. The only survivor of Operation Hollow Ground. The handle was cold under her hand. The people who ordered that operation, Garrett said, are still operational. 3 of them are currently embedded in positions of institutional authority that make them very difficult to reach through conventional means. He let that land. The Admiral downstairs, the man you saved this morning, he's been building a case against them for 2 years. He's the only person with the authority and the evidence chain to bring them down. She turned around. Her face was a controlled, careful surface. Underneath it, something was working at enormous speed, calculating, assessing, running the math on what she was being told and what it meant and what it would cost. And someone tried to kill him this morning, she said. Someone tried to kill him this morning, Garrett confirmed, which means they know he's close, which means we don't have much time. She looked at him. He looked back. The people on his security detail, she said. How many of them are cleared at the level this operation requires? Something shifted in Garrett's expression. The smallest movement, but she caught it immediately the way she caught everything immediately. That's the problem, he said. We're not sure. Her jaw tightened, because that wasn't just a complex, and that was the reason they needed her, not just for her medical skills, not just because she could put a needle in the right place at the right angle while everyone else was still arguing about authorization. Because in an operation where you didn't know who to trust, you needed someone who had no institutional ties, no chain of command of her that could be compromised, no flag planted in a system that might already be rotten, someone invisible, someone who had spent 3 years making herself into nobody. She set her bag back down on the table. I want to see his file, she said. Everything. The operation he's running, the targets, the evidence chain, all of it. Lena, and I want it in writing that my nursing license is reinstated. Full record expungement. Gerald Park downstairs signs off personally with a witness. Garrett almost smiled. Gerald Park doesn't know. Then explain it to him, she said. That's not my problem. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. She sat back down. Outside the conference room, through the closed door, the hospital continued its day. Monitors beeping, gurneys rolling, the persistent, ordinary sound of a place that was built to keep people alive. Lena Reyes put her hands flat on the table and looked at the man across from her and thought about the team she'd lost and the mission that had never officially happened and the quiet life she'd built and walked away from in 30 seconds with a 14-gauge needle. She thought about her plant on the windowsill at home, the one she watered on Sundays. She thought about Mrs. Okafor and the jollof rice. Then she set all of it aside, the way she had learned to set things aside neatly and completely in the place where she kept everything that had to wait. Start talking, she said. Downstairs in Bay 2, the Admiral opened his eyes. The room was quiet. The monitors ran their steady rhythm. The IV dripped its slow, patient drip. He lifted his arms slowly with effort, the movement of a man navigating the heavy resistance of sedation and pain, and looked at the inside of his forearm. The tattoo there was old, faded at the edges, a trident over an eagle, over an anchor with a single pistol crossed beneath. The SEAL insignia. He lowered his arm. He looked at the ceiling, and in the silence of the room, barely audible, he said one word. Reyes. The file was 43 pages long. Garrett slid it across the table without ceremony. No folder, no cover sheet, just 43 printed pages held together by a single binder clip, the kind of document that looked deliberately unremarkable because everything inside it was the opposite. Lena picked it up. She didn't start from the beginning. She went straight to page 11, the way someone goes to the part of a building they already know exists, and started reading. Garrett watched her read. He had watched a lot of people read difficult documents over the course of his career. Most people slowed down when things got hard. They reread sentences. They looked up. They asked questions to buy themselves time to process. Lena read the way she did everything else, with a forward momentum that didn't pause for shock, that absorbed information and kept moving, that had learned somewhere along the way that stopping to feel things was a luxury with a price tag most situations couldn't afford. She turned a page, then another. On page 19, she stopped. Not for long, 3 seconds, maybe 4. But she stopped and her jaw moved slightly, and then she turned the page and kept going. Garrett had written page 19 himself. He knew what was on it. He said nothing. She finished the file, set it down, put both hands flat on the table again. That gesture that he was beginning to understand was not calm, Izakwi, but the structure she built around herself when she needed to keep the surface intact. Operation Hollow Ground, she said. Yes. It's in here, the full operational record. Yes. You told me it was classified until 2045. It was, he said. I reclassified it this morning. Special authorization. He paused. I needed you to have the full picture. She looked at him. Who gave the order to proceed on hollow ground even after the intelligence failure? Page 19 redacts the name. I know. I want the name Garrett. You'll have it, Garrett, he said, when we're further along. I know it's not enough, but it's what I have right now, and you know the difference between me stalling and me being genuinely constrained by operational security. He held her gaze. You've always been able to tell the difference. She was quiet for a moment. The Admiral downstairs, she said. Vance, Ishtayu, Rear Admiral Daniel Vance, yes. He has the name. He has more than the name. He has a documented chain of command financial records and 2 witnesses in protective custody. Garrett's voice tightened slightly on the word witnesses in the way that communicated more than the word itself. Which is why someone put him in a car this morning that was routed through a stretch of highway with no camera coverage and a conveniently disabled GPS. The chest trauma wasn't an accident. No, someone hit the vehicle. A truck, reported stolen 3 days ago. Driver disappeared. He paused. The 2 agents in the front of Vance's car didn't survive. Lena absorbed that, set it in the place where she kept things that needed to be processed later. And the security detail currently outside this hospital, she said. 6 agents, 3 of whom I trust completely. The other 3, he stopped. The other 3 were assigned through a routing system that was compromised 14 months ago. We didn't find out about the compromise until last week. So there are 3 people currently in this building, Lena said, who may have been sent here to finish the job. It's possible. And you brought me into a room with that information and no weapon and no exit brief. You don't need a weapon, and you've already mapped 3 exits, Garrett said. You identified them when you walked in. She didn't deny it. Which 3 agents, she asked. I can't confirm identities yet. The moment I pull one of them, the others know something changed. So we're sitting in a room with potential hostiles in the building, an unprotected target 2 floors down, and a compromised security rotation. She breathed out slowly. When does the witness protection situation become critical? 12 hours. If Vance doesn't make a secure call to the case handler by 2100 tonight, the witnesses go dark standard protocol. Case files get buried. We lose everything. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:47 a.m., 11 hours and 13 minutes. All right, she said. She stood up. Garrett looked up at her. Where are you going? To see Vance. The agents outside this room are going to let me through, she said. Because you're going to tell them to. She looked at him. Unless you'd like to waste another 20 minutes explaining the situation to me. He stood, opened the door. The lead agent, she had started privately thinking of him as steady, for the quality in his eyes, looked at Garrett, received the nod, and stepped aside. Lena walked out without looking at any of them, moving at the pace she had settled into over years of moving through hostile environments. Deliberate, purposeful, the pace that was fast enough to communicate urgency and controlled enough not to trigger alarm. The elevator was too slow. She took the stairs. 1 flight down, she pushed through the door into the main corridor of the first floor, and the ER opened up around her, the noise, the movement, the controlled chaos of a busy morning that had continued completely indifferent to everything happening 2 floors above it. But not entirely indifferent. She felt it immediately. The texture of the room had changed from when she'd walked through it an hour ago. The staff was still working, still moving, but there was a current running underneath the ordinary. The specific alert frequency of people who know something significant is happening nearby and are monitoring it with their peripheral vision while pretending to do something else. Deborah was at the nurse's station. She looked up when Lena came through the stairwell door, and her expression went through 3 distinct phases in rapid succession: surprise, relief, and then something that was working very hard to look like professional neutrality. You're back, Deborah said. Briefly, Lena said. She didn't stop walking. Lena, Deborah's voice caught her. Is everything? Take the afternoon crew off Bay 2, Lena said, still moving. Nobody goes in or out except Webb and whoever he specifically requests. Lock the door on my authority. Deborah blinked. You've been terminated, you don't have Deb. Lena stopped, turned, looked at her directly. The way she had looked at the federal agent in Bay 2 that morning. Not aggressive, not threatening, but with something behind her eyes that communicated a very specific and serious fact about the current state of reality. Please. Deborah held her gaze for a moment, then she reached for her radio. Lena went to Bay 2. The agent outside this bay door was one of the three Garrett didn't trust. She knew it before she reached him. Not from his face was professional and controlled and gave nothing obvious away. She knew it from his position. He was standing 6 inches further from the door than optimal coverage required, far enough to appear to be guarding, close enough to the corridor junction to have a sight line in 2 directions. It was the position of someone who was watching more than one thing simultaneously. He looked at her. This patient is restricted. Sandra Cho cleared my access, Lena said. The name was a test. Sandra hadn't cleared anything yet, but the name carried weight in this context, and the way this man processed that weight would tell her something. He paused, 2 seconds too long. I'll need to confirm. Of course, she said. She smiled, the practiced, slightly apologetic smile of someone being reasonably cooperative. I'll wait right here. He reached for his comm. She watched his hands, watched his eyes, watched the micro-expression that crossed his face as he made the call, the specific arrangement of a person composing what they're about to say before they say it, which is different from the arrangement of a person making a routine confirmation call. He was reporting her presence, not to Sandra. She let him make the call. She stood there, hands visible, expression neutral. She counted the seconds. She mapped the corridor in her peripheral vision, the service door at the east end, the supply room, the second agent she could see near the elevator, the third one she couldn't see but whose position she could infer from the angles. The agent on the comm finished his call. You're cleared, he said and stepped aside. She went in. Vance was awake. He was more awake than he had any business being given what his body had been through in the last 3 hours. He was propped up slightly, IV in his left arm, the chest tube working monitor steady, and his eyes when they found her were the eyes of a man who had been waiting. She closed the door behind her, approached the bed, spoke quietly and immediately. You said my name, downstairs, before. He looked at her without surprise. I knew you were here, he said. His voice was rough but clear. The technique you used, I've only ever seen one person do it that way. Modified entry angle left hand dominant, you rotated 15 degrees on insertion. He paused to breathe. Your father used to do it exactly the same way. The air in the room changed. Lena absorbed that sentence and did not let it move her face. You served with him, she said. I commanded his team, Vance said. Before I had stars, he was the best medic I ever saw. Better than the doctors, better than the surgeons. His eyes stayed on hers. He used to say he could hear a lung collapsing, that the sound of the breathing changed just before the monitor caught it. He stopped. You can too, can't you? What do you need from me? She said. He understood immediately that she wasn't deflecting. She was redirecting from the personal to the operational because the personal would have to wait, and he was a man who had spent his life making that same choice. Garrett told you about the witnesses, he said. Yes. He didn't tell you which one is the most critical. He shifted slightly, a careful, deliberate movement. There are 2 people in protective custody. One of them has the documentary evidence. One of them has the testimony that corroborates it. Without both, the case falls apart. He breathed. The person with the testimony, her name is Maria Consuelo Reyes. Lena went absolutely still. She's not related to you, Vance said quickly. Different family. But she served as a civilian contractor with naval intelligence for 11 years, and she was present at the briefing that ordered hollow ground forward after the intelligence failure. His voice dropped. She can identify the chain of command that sent your team in knowing the extraction window was compromised. Lena's hands were flat at her sides. She's been in protective custody for 6 months, Vance continued. But 48 hours ago, her handler missed a check-in. We don't know if he was pulled or if he was turned. We don't know if she's still secure. He held Lena's gaze. Garrett doesn't know this yet. I'm telling you first because you're the only person in this building right now that I know for certain isn't compromised. How do you know that? Because if you were Jean, he said simply, I'd already be dead. She exhaled slowly. Where is she? Lena asked. The address is in a secondary file on Garrett's tablet. He doesn't know I know it's there. His analyst put it in the wrong partition, the one I have read access to. He almost smiled. Old man in a hospital bed. People underestimate what you do with the time. You accessed a classified file from a hospital bed. I accessed my own case file from a hospital bed, he said. There's a distinction. She looked at him for a moment. You're not supposed to be this coherent, she said. I refused the full sedation dosage, he said. Told the resident it made me nauseous. He paused. It does, but that's not why. She nearly laughed. She didn't. Garrett's going to want to run this through channels, she said. Garrett's a good man, Vance said, but he runs everything through channels. And whoever is in those channels, whoever authorized that truck, whoever set up this morning is watching those channels very carefully right now. He looked at her steadily. You know what needs to happen. Yes, she said. Are you going to do it? She looked at him, at the SEAL insignia on his arm, at the chest tube working its patient mechanical work, at the man who had commanded her father's Tahim and had spent 2 years trying to build a case against the people who had ordered 11 men into a mission with no exit. I need 40 minutes, she said, and I need Webb to keep you stable without flagging anything to the agents outside. Marcus Webb is the most discreet physician I've ever met, Vance said. I know because I've been watching him work for 3 hours. She nodded, turned to go. Reyes, Vance said. She stopped. Your father saved my life twice, he said. In Kandahar and again outside Mosul. He never asked for anything in return, never mentioned it, just moved on to the next problem. He paused. You're doing the same thing right now. I want you to know that I see it. She stood with her back to him for a moment. Get some rest, she said. I'll be back. She went out. The agent was still at the door. He watched her leave. She felt his eyes on her back and cataloged the position of every other person in the corridor without looking directly at any of them. 3 hostels, 3 positions, a corridor that intersected at 2 points. She had 23 seconds between the bay door and the stairwell before she was out of the primary sight line. She used them well. Marcus Webb found her in the stairwell, not by accident. She had sent Angie to get him using the same quiet channel that Angie had been using for 20 years to move important information through a hospital without it being seen. He came through the door and stopped when he saw her face. Tell me, he said, the patient in Bay 2 needs to stay stable and undisturbed for the next 4 hours. No new staff, no rotation, no agent access. You're the only medical contact. That's straightforward. What's the other part? She looked at him. The other part is that you're going to have to trust me without a full explanation. And I know that's not how you work, and I'm asking anyway. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He had the particular stillness of a person running a rapid internal assessment, not of the request, but of the person making it. 2 months ago, he said slowly, you were assigned to restock base 7, and I watched you identify a septic patient 3 beds over because you heard something in their breathing that none of my residents caught. I asked you about it later, and you said you'd gotten lucky. I said I'd gotten lucky, she agreed. You've never gotten lucky, he said. My once in 2 months. Everything you do is calculated. Exact. He paused. Who are you, Lena? She met his eyes. Right now, she said, I'm the person asking you to keep that man alive for 4 hours without asking questions. A long beat. 4 hours, he said. 4 hours. He pushed back through the door. Upstairs, Garrett was on the phone. She came through the conference room door without knocking, and he looked up with an expression that moved quickly from surprise to assessment to the specific resigned understanding of a man who has put a very particular kind of person into motion and is now experiencing the consequences. I need access to your secondary file partition, she said. He lowered the phone. How do you? Vance told me, the witness location. Maria Reyes. Garrett's expression shifted. Lena, that address goes through a secure channel. We have a protocol for... The protocol is compromised, she said. Vance's handler missed a check-in 48 hours ago. If we run this through standard channels, we are alerting the same people who tried to kill Vance this morning. He stared at her. Garrett. She moved to the table, put both hands flat on it, leaned forward slightly. You brought me back into this because you needed someone outside the system. I'm outside the system. Let me be outside the system. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he set his phone down, picked up his tablet, entered a 12-digit code, turned it to face her. She read the address, read it once, put it away exactly where she needed it. I need a vehicle, she said. Registered clean, nothing in the system. The lead agent, not the agents, someone outside the building. He looked at her. Sandra Cho, she said. He almost smiled. You trust her? I don't trust anyone, she said. But she came in here with her own portfolio, her own read on the situation, and she left when you told her to without being resentful about it. That means she's disciplined enough to follow lead and independent enough to have her own assessment. That's the profile I need. She straightened up. Call her. He called her. Sandra was in the parking lot in 6 minutes, not because she'd been waiting because she had anticipated. She met Lena at the service entrance on the building's east side away from the main agent positions, with keys already in her hand. Clean vehicle, Lena said. My personal car, Sandra said. Registered to a name that doesn't connect to any agency. She paused. I'm going with you. No. Lena, I need you here, Lena said. The 3 compromised agents, they're going to realize something's moved when I disappear. You're the one who keeps that from becoming a problem for Vance. Sandra looked at her, hard, assessing. You know which 3 they are? Sandra said. It wasn't quite a question. Southeast corner of the corridor, the man at the bay door, and the one near the elevator who's standing at the wrong angle, Lena said. Bay door agent is the one who made the report. He's the primary. The other 2 are backup. Sandra stared. I've been watching since I walked back in, Lena said. It's what I do. Sandra handed over the keys without another word. 4 hours, Lena said. 4 hours, Sandra said. After that, I cannot hold this. Lena walked to the car. She drove out of the parking lot the way she drove everywhere. No speed, no drama, no behavior that would register on any camera or in any observer's memory. A gray car, an ordinary driver. Going somewhere completely unremarkable. Inside, her hands were steady on the wheel. Her mind was already 40 miles ahead. On the woman in protective custody who could name the person who had sent 11 men to die. On the team she'd lost. On her father. On 30 seconds with a 14-gauge needle that had restarted everything she'd spent 3 years trying to stop. She drove. Behind her, the hospital receded in the rearview mirror. And in Bay 2, Rear Admiral Daniel Vance closed his eyes and waited. And in the conference room on the 2nd floor, Thomas Garrett sat alone with a tonlet and a phone and the particular weight of a man who has set something into motion that cannot be stopped and is no longer certain that it should be. And in the corridor of the 1st floor, 3 agents who were not what they appeared stood at their positions and watched the doors and waited for the moment, any moment now, when they would receive instruction. The problem was, so did Sandra Cho, and she had been trained by the same people they had. She just had better reasons. Sandra Cho had a particular gift for stillness, not the stillness of someone who was waiting passively, the stillness of someone who was building a structure around themselves while everything outside it moved at full speed. She stood at the nurse's station on the 1st floor and watched the 3 agents with the same quiet peripheral precision that Lena had used, and she thought about timing. Timing was everything in a situation like this. Move too early, in the primary agent bay door southeast position, the one who had made the unauthorized report would signal his backup, and the whole thing would accelerate into territory that was difficult to control inside a hospital full of civilians. Move too late, and whatever instruction was coming down the line to those 3 men would arrive before she could contain it. She had a window. She estimated it at about 90 minutes, which was optimistic, so she planned for 60. She pulled out her phone and made a call. It rang twice. I need a quiet extraction team at Riverside Memorial, she said when the line connected. 3 subjects, 1st floor, not law enforcement, and enforcement do not initiate contact until I give a position signal. She paused. And I need it in 45 minutes, not 60. Things are moving faster than projected. She hung up. Deborah Haynes was 3 feet away, pretending to update a chart. You heard that, Sandra said. I heard nothing, Deborah said, without looking up. I've been a charge nurse for 19 years. I don't hear things that aren't my business. Sandra looked at her sideways. She's coming back, right? Deborah said, very quietly, still not looking up. Lena, she's coming back. Sandra considered her answer carefully. Yes, she said. Deborah's pen moved across the chart. Good, you said, she said, and that was all. 41 miles from the hospital, Lena turned onto a residential street that looked exactly like what it was designed to look like: ordinary. Middle income. The kind of street where nothing of consequence ever happened, which made it the ideal place to keep something of enormous consequence from happening. She parked Sandra's car 2 blocks from the address. Walked. She had the address committed to memory, not written, not on any device, not in any system. Just in the place inside her head where things lived without needing a container. She had learned that skill in a different life under conditions that made the current situation feel in certain specific ways almost manageable. Almost. The house was a 2-story with a detached garage and a single sedan in the driveway. She walked past it once without looking directly at it. Cataloged the windows, 3 visible on the ground floor, 2 upstairs, 1 with a light. Cataloged the car engine cold, parked at a slight angle, like someone had come in a hurry and not corrected. Cataloged the front door, no visible damage, but the frame near the lock had the micro misalignment of a door that had been opened recently by someone who was very careful about not leaving marks. Someone had been here. Recently, within the last few hours. She looped around the block, came at the house from the alley side, found the rear entrance unlocked, which it shouldn't have been. She went in. The house was quiet with the specific quality of a place where the quiet had replaced something louder. She moved through the kitchen. The table had 2 cups on it, 1 half full, 1 on its side, contents dried on the surface. No coffee maker running. She touched the side of the upright cup, cold but not by much. An hour, maybe 90 minutes. Something had interrupted this. She went through to the living room, furniture undisturbed, nothing obviously missing, nothing obviously searched, which meant whoever had been here either knew exactly what they were looking for or hadn't gotten to the searching stage yet. The staircase was ahead. She went up. The second door on the left was the one with the light she'd seen from outside. She stopped at the door, put her hand flat against it, listened, breathing. 1 person. Awake, the rhythm wasn't the deep regularity of sleep. Someone sitting very still, trying to make very little sound. She knocked twice, then once. The universal pattern that means, I'm not what you're afraid of. A long pause. Then a voice, female, older, accented and shaking in the specific way of someone who has been alone and frightened for a long time and is desperately hoping that the knock on the door is the right thing and not the wrong one. Who is there? My name is Lena Carter, she said quietly. Rear Admiral Vance sent me. Another pause. Longer. He is alive, the voice said. He's alive, stable. He's at Riverside Memorial. The pause this time was different, not fear, but something releasing. The particular exhale of someone who has been holding a very specific, terrible possibility in their body and is now putting it down. The door opened. Maria Consuelo Reyes was 63 years old, 5'2", with the kind of face that had once been beautiful and was now interesting, which was better. She wore civilian clothes that had been slept in her gray hair, loose, her eyes alert with the persistent vigilance of someone who had been afraid for long enough that the fear had become structural. She looked at Lena. Lena looked at her. Your handler, Lena said. When did you last hear from him? 44 hours ago, Maria said. He said he would check in the next morning. He did not. She paused. I have been in this room since then. Did anyone else come to the house in that time? Maria hesitated. 1 second. Yes, she said. Last night, 2 men. They did not knock. They came in through the back the same way you did. She held Lena's gaze. I heard them in the kitchen. I turned off the light and did not make a sound for 4 hours. They left. They left. She paused. One of them said I heard him say that she wasn't here, that the location must have been wrong. She stopped. They thought I was someone else. Lena processed that rapidly. They had a different name for you. My handler's name for me in the file, Maria said slowly. My operational alias, not my real name. She looked at Lena with those sharp, tired eyes. Someone gave them access to the file, but not all of it. They had the address and the alias, not the real identity, which meant the breach was partial, which meant someone with mid-level access, not top level, not Garrett's tier, someone below, someone with enough clearance to pull a location, but not enough to pull a full identity profile. That narrowed it considerably. We need to move, Lena said. Can you walk? I have been walking for 63 years, Maria said. I can walk. Sit down. They were out of the house in 4 minutes. Lena moved them at a steady pace, not running, not conspicuous. The deliberate middle speed of two people going somewhere they have a reason to be. She kept Maria on her left slightly behind and ran the street continuously with her eyes. Nothing visible, but visibility wasn't the problem. The problem was communication. The moment whoever had breached the house realized they had had the wrong alias and went back to the file for the real name. She needed to be well clear of this address before that happened. They reached Sandra's car. Lena got Maria into the passenger seat and got in behind the wheel in a single efficient sequence. Where are we going? Maria asked. Back to Vance, Lena said. She was already pulling out. Then you're going to give your testimony on record in Vance's presence, in a room with enough witnesses that it cannot be quietly buried. Maria was quiet for a moment. You know what is in my testimony, she said. I know the shape of it. The name, Maria said. The man who gave the order on hollow ground, you know who it is. I know the file redacts a name on page 19, Lena said. I know Vance has the name. I know you can corroborate it. Maria looked out the window. Her hands in her lap were folded very deliberately, the way people fold their hands when they need something to hold on to. His name, Maria said, is Vice Admiral Curtis Harlan. The car was very quiet. Lena kept her eyes on the road, kept her speed exactly at the limit, kept her hands exactly where they needed to be. Curtis Harlan, Naval Intelligence Command, 31 years of service. The man who had shaken her hand at her father's memorial, the classified one, the small official one, with 11 folded flags and a room full of people who were not allowed to say why they were crying. She had shaken his hand. He had said her father was a hero. She remembered thinking that he seemed genuinely sad. You were present, Lena said, and her voice was completely steady, at the briefing where Harlan authorized hollow ground forward. I wrote the briefing notes, Maria said. I prepared the intelligence summary that showed the extraction window was compromised. He read it. I watched him read it. She paused. Then he signed the authorization anyway. Another pause, smaller, harder. He looked at me when he signed it, and he said the mission objective outweighs the operational risk. I remember those exact words. I have remembered them every day for 15 years. Lena said nothing. The road came toward her and fell behind her. I'm sorry, Maria said quietly, for your team, for your father. I have been sorry for a very long time. Lena drove. Back at Riverside Memorial, the situation had compressed. Sandra Cho knew it before anyone said a word because she had been watching the bay door agent for the last 40 minutes, and his body language had changed the specific shift of a person who has received new information and is recalibrating. He'd checked his phone twice in the last 10 minutes. The second time he'd turned slightly away before reading the message. They'd found out. She didn't know what exactly they'd found out, whether the alias breach had been corrected, whether someone had tracked Sandra's car, whether the handler who'd missed his check-in had been made to talk. It didn't matter which. What mattered was that the timeline had collapsed from 60 minutes to something much shorter. She texted 2 words to the number she'd called earlier. Move now. Then she walked to the bay door agent and said calmly and pleasantly, I need you to come with me for a security briefing. Admiral Garrett's request. He looked at her. She looked back. Now, he said. Now, she said. And she held his gaze with the particular quality of someone who has already accounted for every response he might give. He came with her. It took 40 seconds. And then Garrett's clean agents had the other 2 in hand, not loudly, not dramatically, in the practiced, efficient way of people removing a problem from a space before it becomes a larger problem. Marcus Webb, watching from the corridor, turned around and went back to his patient. He was a doctor. He treated what was in front of him. Everything else was someone else's department. Lena arrived back at the hospital at 1:23 p.m. She came in through the service entrance, Maria beside her, and went straight to Garrett via the stairwell. Garrett was on his feet the moment she came through the door. He saw Maria. Something moved across his face, relief and the complex emotion of a man who had been holding the weight of a case for 2 years and can feel it beginning to shift. "She's intact," Lena said. "The house was breached last night wrong. Alias in the access file, they missed her. Handler's status is unknown. We need an emergency testimony recording setup, secure line authenticated witnesses." She looked at him. "And we need it in the next 30 minutes before anyone else realizes what we have." Garrett was already on the phone. Maria sat down. Lena sat beside her, not touching, not speaking, just present. The way you're present for someone who is about to do something that costs them something so they know they are not doing it alone. "Are you ready?" Lena asked her. Maria straightened in her chair. The shake was still in her hands, but her voice when she spoke was something else entirely. "I have been ready for 15 years, she said. "I was only waiting for someone to ask." It took 18 minutes to set up. Garrett had pulled in 2 authenticated witnesses, a federal judge reached by emergency secure line, and a JAG officer who had been on standby for the Vance case since its inception. The recording was encrypted, time-stamped, routed through a server outside the compromised system. Maria Consuelo Reyes spoke for 44 minutes. She spoke without notes, without hesitation, and without the tremor that had been in her hands since Lena had found her. She spoke the way someone speaks who has been carrying a specific truth for a very long time and is finally being given the table to put it on. She named Curtis Harlan. She described the briefing. She recounted the intelligence summary, the signed authorization, the 7 words. The mission objective outweighs the operational risk that she had heard spoken in a room where 11 men's lives were being traded for an objective that was later classified beyond the reach of any official inquiry. The judge asked 3 clarifying questions. The JAG officer asked 1. Maria answered all of them directly with the specificity of a woman who understood that the difference between accountability and impunity often came down to precise detail. When she was done, the room was quiet in the specific way that rooms are quiet when something significant has just been documented and cannot be undocumented. Garrett looked at Lena. "This is enough," he said. "With Vance's evidence chain and this testimony, this is enough." "Then move," she said, "before Harlan knows the testimony exists." He moved. Downstairs, Lena went back to Vance. He was awake as she'd expected. Marcus was there checking the drainage from the chest tube, speaking in the quiet technical shorthand of a physician who has stopped finding a patient's continued survival surprising and has moved on to simply managing it. "She's here," Marcus said without looking up. "And whatever you 2 are about to discuss, I am very professionally not present for it." He adjusted something on the IV line and walked out. Vance looked at Lena. "Maria," he said. "Safe. Testimony on record. Authenticated." She sat down in the chair beside the bed. "Curtis Harlan." His jaw tightened, just slightly. "You know?" "Maria told me." "I wanted to tell you myself," he said. "I've been working up to that for 2 years. He was quiet for a moment. He shook your hand at the memorial. "I know because I was there. I remember. I wanted to say something that day," he said. "I didn't have enough yet. I was 2 years away from having enough." He looked at his hands. "That's the part I carry." "We all carry something," she said. He looked at her, she looked at him. And in that space between them was everything that didn't need to be said. Her father and the mission, and 11 flags and 15 years, and the quiet life in a 2-bedroom apartment with a plant and a neighbor who asked no questions. All of it sitting in the air, knowledge without being spoken in the way of people who have learned that some things are too heavy for words, but too important to put down. "What happens now?" he asked. "Garrett issues the warrant. Harlan is currently in D.C. There are federal agents within range." She paused. "He won't see it coming. He thinks the case is still building. He doesn't know about Maria. When he finds out, he'll find out from a federal arresting officer," she said. "Not before." Vance nodded slowly, breathed in the careful way of a man managing pain without advertising it. "Then, and you, what happens to you?" She was quiet for a moment. "Garrett reinstates my nursing license. Gerald Parks signs the expungement, which based on the expression he had this morning, he will do with significant enthusiasm and no further questions. She paused. After that, he made you an offer, Vance said. It wasn't a question. He mentioned a program, she said carefully. Crisis response, hospital preparedness. It's real, Vance said. I know about it. It's been underfunded and understaffed for 2 years because nobody with the right skills wants to run it. He looked at her. Nobody with your skills. She was quiet. You spent 2 months stocking shelves, Vance said. Not because you couldn't do more, because you were trying to need less. He stopped, breathed. Lena. Elena. He paused on the name, the real name, the one she had not heard anyone say aloud in 3 years. You cannot spend the rest of your life making yourself smaller so the world doesn't ask anything of you. Her throat tightened. She didn't let it show. I know, she said. Your father never made himself smaller, he said. Not once. Not in 30 years of service. He took up exactly as much space as was needed, and he filled it completely. He held her gaze. So do you. You've just been doing it in secret. She stood up. She walked to the window and stood with her back to him for a moment, and she let herself feel very briefly, very precisely, in the controlled way that was the only way she knew how to do it, the weight of everything the day had been. The needle, the firing, the parking lot, the file, the 43 pages, the name on page 19, the house with the cold coffee cup, Maria's voice in the car, the 44 minutes of testimony that had just closed a 15-year-old wound that she had been carrying like a second spine. She breathed out. She turned around. The program, she said, Garrett's offer, does it have operational authority or is it advisory only? Something shifted in Vance's expression, the beginning of something that wasn't quite a smile but was in that territory. Full operational authority, he said, with a direct reporting line to Naval Medical Command, civilian hospital integration rights, and federal budget allocation that hasn't been touched in 2 years and is therefore substantially larger than anyone has been advertising. She looked at him. You've read the program file, she said. I've had a lot of time in this bed, he said. I'm a thorough man. You planned this, she said, not with anger, with the particular recognition of someone who has just realized they've been moved around a board by a person who had the whole game in their head before anyone else knew there was a game. Not today, before today. You knew about me, you knew about the program, I created the program, he said. 2 years ago, it's been waiting for the right director. She stared at him. The Admiral you saved this morning, he said quietly, has been trying to do 2 things simultaneously for 24 months. Close the case that killed your father, and build something that uses the skills of people like you, people who were damaged by the system to protect the civilians that the system is supposed to serve. He paused. I needed the case closed before I could launch the program. The program couldn't launch with Harlan still operational. He'd have buried it. He held her eyes. Today, both things happened. The room was very still. You engineered this entire day, she said. I put the right pieces in proximity, he said carefully. You engineered the outcome. There's a difference. She laughed. Actually laughed short, sharp, the genuine involuntary laugh of a person who has just been outmaneuvered by someone they respect and doesn't entirely mind. Then she stopped, and she looked at him, at the man in the hospital bed who had commanded her father's team, who had spent 2 years building a case and a program simultaneously, who had said her name from a bay to Gurney because he recognized her father's technique in her hands. When do I start? She said. Vance closed his eyes, exhaled slowly, the deep, specific exhale of a train who has been holding something for a very long time and is finally putting it down. Monday, he said, but first go home. Water your plant. She stopped. She turned and looked at him. How do you know about... I told you, he said, without opening his eyes. I'm a thorough man. She shook her head. She walked out. But in the corridor, she passed Deborah Haynes, who looked at her with the expression of someone who has 19 years of professional composure and is currently using all of it. Your badge, Deborah said. She held it out. Lena looked at it. The badge Gerald Park had taken from her that morning. Return now, new access codes already loaded, she could tell from the chip indicator, light green instead of its previous blue. She took it. Welcome back, Deborah said. Lena put it in her pocket. "Thank you, Deb," she said. She walked toward the exit, and for the first time almost, she didn't count the steps. She watered the plant on Sunday. It was a small thing, a pothos in a terracotta pot on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. The kind of plant that survived on neglect and indirect light, and the occasional attention of someone who had chosen it specifically because it didn't ask for much. She had bought it 14 months ago from a gas station display rack, which was perhaps the least ceremonial origin story for a living thing she could imagine. And she had kept it alive through 2 winters and 1 very bad spring, and right now standing at her kitchen sink with a glass of water and the particular stillness of a Sunday morning, it was the most important thing in the room. She poured the water slowly, watched it soak in. She had been home for 2 days. 2 days of sleeping more than she had slept in 3 years. 2 days of eating actual meals at her actual table instead of standing over the kitchen counter with something reheated. 2 days of Mrs. Okafor stopping by once with jollof rice, once with a look on her face that communicated a very complete and practiced willingness to ask no questions whatsoever, which was the most generous thing anyone had offered Lena in a very long time. She had sat with Mrs. Okafor for an hour on Saturday afternoon drinking tea, saying almost nothing, and felt something slowly unknot in her chest that she hadn't fully realized was knotted. On Sunday morning, she watered the plant, and then her phone rang, not her regular phone, the second one, the one Garrett had given her on Thursday before she left the hospital, small and black, and registered to nothing. She picked it up. "Curtis Harlan was taken into federal custody at 6:14 this morning," Garrett said without preamble. "Joint operation 3 agencies. His home in Alexandria. He did not resist." A pause. He asked apparently if Vance was behind it. The arresting officer told him Vance was in the hospital recovering from an attempt on his life. Another pause. Harlan said nothing after that, not one word. Lena stood at the window with the empty water glass in her hand. "Is the testimony secured?" she asked. "Triple redundant, 3 separate servers, 2 physical copies, federal court filing initiated as of Saturday midnight." Garrett's voice carried the specific weight of someone who had been awake for approximately 40 hours and was running on the fuel of a thing finally done. "Maria is in a new location, fully vetted team, nobody from the compromise rotation. She's secure." "The 3 agents Sandra pulled," Lena said. "Status? In federal holding. Cooperating. Which means they're scared. Which means there may be more threads to pull." He paused. "That's not your problem right now." "I know. How are you?" She looked at the plant, at the water still darkening the soil at the surface. "I watered my plant," she said. A beat of silence. Then from Garrett something that was almost a laugh. A short exhale through the nose that carried in it 20 years of hard work and the specific relief of a man who has closed a wound he helped create. "Good," he said. "That's good. Tell Vance the testimony held," she said. "He knows. He's been awake since 4 a.m., and he's been making Marcus Webb's life extremely difficult." Garrett paused. "Dr. Webb, for what it's worth, told me to tell you that Vance is the most demanding patient he has ever treated and that he holds you personally responsible." She almost smiled. "Tell Webb I said he's welcome." She hung up. She set the phone on the counter. She stood in the kitchen of her 2-bedroom apartment on a Sunday morning, and she let the silence be what it was. Not the silence of hiding, not the silence of someone holding their breath, but something different, something that had space in it, room to move. She thought about Monday. She arrived at the hospital at 7 a.m., not through the main entrance. Through the service door on the east side, the one she had used the most over the past 2 months, the one that deposited her into the back corridor near the supply rooms, the one that most staff used when they wanted to arrive without being noticed. Old habit, she stopped, looked at the service door, then at the main entrance, glass morning light coming through it, the full width of a hospital going about its business. She turned around. She went in through the front. Deborah saw her first. She was at the nurse's station, always at the nurse's station, the permanent gravitational center of the ER, and she looked up when Lena came through the main doors, and her expression did the thing it had been doing since Thursday, the layered look of a woman recalibrating everything she thought she knew about someone she'd been working beside for 2 months. "Carter," she said. "Haynes," Lena said. "Administration called Friday," Deborah said in her precise, careful way. "Your file has been adjusted." I was told the details are above my clearance level, which is a sentence I have never heard in 19 years at this hospital, and I am choosing to accept it and move forward. That seems wise, Lena said. Gerald Park, Deborah continued, signing 11 separate documents on Friday afternoon. I know this because his assistant told our floor coordinator, who told Angie, who told me. 11 documents in one afternoon. Gerald Park, who once spent 3 weeks deliberating over whether to approve new IV poles. People surprise you, Lena said. Deborah looked at her steadily. Where are you going? Second floor, Lena said. I have a meeting. With Admiral Garrett. Deborah was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Should I be concerned? She asked. About the hospital, Lena said. No. About Gerald Park, possibly. She paused. About me, no. She went to the elevator. What? Garrett had commandeered a conference room that was slightly larger than the one on the second floor where all of Thursday had happened, and had filled it with 2 people Lena didn't know, and one she did. Sandra Cho was at the far end of the table, coffee in hand, with the expression of someone who had slept reasonably well and was already 3 steps ahead of the current moment. The 2 strangers were a man in his 50s with the bearing of someone retired military, in the eyes of someone who hadn't entirely retired, and a woman in her 40s in civilian clothes, with a tablet in front of her covered in a density of notes that communicated she was the person in the room who actually knew how everything worked. Garrett stood when Lena came in. You came in through the front, he said. She stopped. You have cameras on the entrance. We have cameras everywhere, he said, but that's not why I noticed. He held her gaze. I noticed because on 42 of the 43 days you've been on file at this hospital, you used the service entrance. He paused. Small thing. Not that small, Sandra said from the end of the table without looking up from her coffee. Lena sat down. The program, she said. Let's start. The woman with the tablet, her name was Dr. Patricia Foley, and she was, as Lena's assessment had predicted, the person in the room who knew exactly how everything worked, pulled up the program structure on the room's display. The National Crisis Medical Response Initiative had been in development for 26 months. It existed officially as a joint program between Naval Medical Command and the Department of Homeland Security's Civilian Hospital Integration Division. It had a budget, a mandate, and a staffing blueprint that had been waiting for a director for the entire 26 months of its existence. It also had, as Vance had suggested, a substantially larger operational scope than its official description implied. The civilian component, Patricia said, is what makes this different from anything we've done before. We're not training military medics to work in hospitals. We're training hospitals to function under conditions that previously only military units planned for. Mass casualty events, first structure, disruption, coordinated multi-site incidents. She paused. The program embeds a small, specially trained team in each partner hospital, not visibly, not conspicuously. They look like regular staff. They work regular shifts. But when something happens, they're already there, Lena said. Already there, Patricia confirmed. No deployment time, no transport lag, no external team trying to navigate an unfamiliar facility under pressure. She looked at Lena. We have 7 partner hospitals confirmed. We need 12 to make the network functional. And the embedded staff, Lena said. Where do they come from? Patricia glanced at Garrett. Garrett said, that's actually the first thing we need your input on. We have a candidate pool, former military medical personnel mostly. Some civilian trauma specialists with certain backgrounds. He paused. The problem is selection. We need someone who understands both sides of that, the military medical profile and the civilian integration. Someone who knows what it looks like when a person with serious field experience is hiding inside an ordinary job. He met her eyes. Someone who would recognize, for example, a 2-month ER nurse who anticipates patients 3 beats before the monitor does. The room was quiet. Lena thought about it for a moment. Not about whether to do it, that decision had been made. She knew somewhere around the moment she put her hand back on the table in the second floor conference room and said, start talking. She thought about what it meant, about the shape of the life on the other side of this. The embedded staff, she said. They know what they are. They know their full role, yes, Patricia said. And the hospitals. Senior administration at each partner facility knows the program exists. Operational details are on a need-to-know basis below that level. Lena nodded slowly. Deborah Haynes, she said, charge nurse, first floor ER, 19 years at this hospital. She noticed something was off about me in my first week. She paused. She kept it to herself, managed it professionally, and on Thursday she locked down a federal patient's bay on my verbal authority, without hesitation and without requiring an explanation. She looked at Garrett. She needs to be in the loop, not the full operational picture, but enough. People like her are the infrastructure this program actually runs on. You can't embed a team in a hospital without the right charge nurses knowing what they're protecting. Garrett looked at Patricia. Patricia wrote something on her tablet. Agreed, Garrett said. The retired military man who had not yet spoken and whose name was apparently Colonel Dawes, which Lena had read off a lanyard he hadn't bothered to tuck in, leaned forward. The 7 confirmed hospitals. 2 of them have flagged concerns about the program's relationship to their existing security protocols. They're worried about liability exposure if... I'll speak to them directly, Lena said. Dawes looked at her. Both of them are in different states. I know, I'll travel. She met his gaze. Part of this job is making people in institutions trust a program they don't fully understand yet. That requires a person in the room, not a phone call, and a policy document. She paused. Is that going to be a problem? No, he said. He settled back. The specific settling of someone who has just confirmed something they were measuring. Sandra set down her coffee. There's something else. The room's temperature changed slightly, not dramatically, but in the way that happens when someone who has been waiting to say the important thing finally says it. The 3 agents in federal holding, Sandra said. They're cooperating, as Garrett mentioned. One of them, the bay door agent, has given us a name above Harlan. She paused. Someone who was running Harlan. Someone who has been running a parallel intelligence operation inside Naval Command for potentially 11 years. She looked at Lena. Someone who was directly involved in the hollow ground authorization chain. The room was completely still. A name, Lena said. Not yet confirmed. Sandra said carefully. 24 hours, maybe 48. The corroboration process. Sandra, Lena said it the way Garrett had said Gerald in that hospital corridor, just the name with something underneath it that communicated a very specific and complete message. Sandra held her gaze for a moment. Deputy Director Alan Mercer, she said. Office of Naval Intelligence. The name dropped into the room like something heavy dropped into still water. Lena had heard that name exactly once in a context that had seemed at the time entirely routine. A briefing, 3 weeks before Hollow Ground. A man who had come in for the final operational overview, stayed for 20 minutes, said almost nothing and left. She had registered him the way you register furniture present, unremarkable background. He had been the person above Harlan. He had known everything. He's still operational, Lena said. It wasn't a question. Still operational, Sandra confirmed. High-functioning, trusted, currently overseeing 3 active intelligence programs. She paused, which means the case doesn't end with Harlan's arrest. It continues. Garrett was watching Lena. She was aware of being watched, aware of what they were waiting for, not a decision exactly. More like a declaration. The specific moment when a person who has been recruited stops being recruited and starts being committed. The program runs parallel to this, she said. It was not a question either. The civilian hospital integration, the embedded teams that continues regardless of where the Harlan case goes. Yes, Garrett said, the investigation into Mercer is separate. It runs through existing federal channels, not through this program. Yes, Garrett said again. Then it stays separate, she said. I run the program. The investigation runs its course. They don't intersect unless something changes that requires them to. She looked at Sandra. If something changes, you'll know, Sandra said. Before it changes, Lena said. Not after, Sandra nodded. One single clean nod. Before. Lena looked around the table, at Garrett, who had spent 2 years and one very complicated Thursday getting to this room. At Sandra, who had handed over her car keys without blinking and held a hospital corridor together with 3 potential hostiles in it. At Patricia with her tablet and her 26 months of program architecture. At Dawes, who was measuring her with the professional appreciation of someone who measures people for a living. 12 hospitals, she said. Where are the 5 uncommitted ones? Patricia pulled up the list. They got to work. 2 hours later, Lena took the stairs down to the first floor. She pushed through the door into the main corridor, and the ER opened around her, the sound of it, the movement of it, the persistent, organized urgency of a place that ran on the premise that the next thing through the door mattered and needed to be handled, and someone needed to be ready. Angie Reeves was at the medication cart. She looked up. She did not say anything dramatic. She did not make a speech or ask a question or offer the kind of summarizing comment that big moments sometimes demanded. She simply looked at Lena, the full, frank, 20-year look of a woman who had seen enough to know the difference between someone passing through and someone arriving, and she nodded. Lena nodded back. She went to the nurse's station. Deborah was there as she was always there. She looked up without expression. "I need 10 minutes, Lena said. "Somewhere private." Deborah studied her for exactly 2 seconds. Then she came around the station and led Lena to the small documentation office behind the supply corridor, the room that functioned as the ER's unofficial decompression chamber, where staff went to recollect themselves between difficult shifts. She closed the door. Lena told her, not everything, not the classified components, not the operational specifics, not the names that were still moving through federal channels, but the shape of it, the program, the embedded team concept, the role Riverside Memorial was going to play as the pilot facility, the role Deborah's experience and judgment would play in making that work. Deborah listened to all of it without interrupting. This was not something most people could do, receive genuinely surprising information and stay present for all of it without the impulse to insert themselves into it. Deborah could because Deborah had built 19 years of professional life on the discipline of listening before responding. When Lena finished, the room was quiet. "The 2 nurses I'm considering for the embedded team here," Lena said. "Angie Reeves and Kevin Torres. They both have the profile. Torres was Army medic before nursing school. Angie has field trauma experience from a 2-year stint with Doctors Without Borders." She paused. "I'll need your read on whether they're psychologically ready for a dual role position. That's not something I can assess from a file." "I'll have my read for you by Thursday," Deborah said without hesitation. "Thank you." Deborah was quiet for a moment. "What you did last Thursday," she said, "in Bay 2, the needle." "Yes. I told you to stand back." "You did. And if I had given you a direct order, if I had physically positioned myself between you and that patient, I would have found a way around you," Lena said, respectfully, and as quickly as possible. Deborah looked at her. "I know," she said. "That's what I needed to confirm." She stood up. "Welcome to the program, I suppose." "Welcome back to the ER," Lena said. They went back out to the floor. At 11:40 a.m., Lena's regular phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Marcus Webb, Angie gave me your number, don't blame her. Vance is asking for you. He says it's not medical, which I believe, and not urgent, which I don't. Room 214. She went upstairs. Vance was sitting up in bed, which he wasn't supposed to be doing yet, and was reading something on a tablet, which he absolutely wasn't supposed to have. When Lena came in, he set it aside with the unhurried calm of a man who has never once in his life accepted that rules about his own behavior applied to him with the same force they applied to others. "How's the program?" he said. 3 hours old and already expanding faster than the budget projects. She said, "You should rest." "I'll rest when Mercer is in handcuffs," he said. "Sit down." She sat. He looked at her, the long, full look of someone who has been thinking about a conversation and is now having it. "I want to tell you something about your father," he said, "something that isn't in any file." Her hands were still in her lap. "In Kandahar," he said, "the first time he saved my life, I told him afterward that he shouldn't have done it, that the risk to himself was disproportionate to the asset value of keeping me alive." He paused. "You know what he said?" "No," she said. "He said, 'Sir, with respect, that's not how I was taught to count.'" Vance's voice had something in it now. Not sentiment exactly, but the quality of a thing that had been held carefully for a long time. He wasn't counting assets. He wasn't counting rank or strategic value. He was counting the person in front of him, and the person in front of him needed help, and that was sufficient arithmetic. He looked at her. "You do the same math. You have always done the same math." She didn't speak for a moment. That's not a coincidence, she finally said. No, Vance said. It isn't. She looked at her hands, at the hands that had learned their precision from a man who was gone, that had carried that precision through 3 deployments, and a loss that had no official name, and a nursing degree earned in 14 months and 2 years of restocking shelves and a Monday morning that had changed everything in 30 seconds. I'm going to build something good, she said, quietly, but absolutely, the way she said things when she meant them at the level that went below words. I know, Vance said. The people who died on hollow ground. They'll know, he said. People like that always know. She breathed in. She breathed out. She stood up. I'll be back Thursday, she said. You should be ambulatory by then. We're going to walk the first floor corridor, and you're going to tell me what you observe because I want your operational read on the facility before I finalize the embedded team structure. He raised an eyebrow. You're using a recovering admiral as a site assessment consultant. I'm using the person in this building with the most relevant experience for the task, she said. Rank is incidental. He laughed, actually laughed full and unguarded, the laugh of a man who had not expected to be laughing this week and found it enormously welcome. It cost him something. Physically, he winced, pressed a hand to his chest, but he didn't stop. Thursday, he said. Thursday, she confirmed. She walked out. In the main corridor, the ER moved around her patients and staff and the persistent mechanical rhythm of a place built to hold the line between what could be saved and what couldn't. She had spent 2 months in this place making herself invisible inside it, and now she walked through it like she belonged to it, which she did, and like it belonged to something larger than itself, which it now also did. Her badge was in her pocket. She took it out, looked at it, Lena Carter, and the name she had built. The name that had carried her through 2 years of quiet and ordinary and carefully chosen smallness. She clipped it to her scrubs. It was still her name. She had earned it in a nursing school that had required everything she had to give in 14 months, and she had practiced under it in this ER for 2 months, and she had saved a man's life under it on a Thursday morning when the monitors were flatlining and everyone else was waiting for authorization. Elena Reyes was the name she had been born with, the name on classified files, the name Vance had said in a hospital bay before she even reached him. She was both of them. She had always been both of them. She had just been trying to live as only one. She walked onto the ER floor. Angie looked up from the medication cart and raised her chin, the small economical acknowledgement of a woman who understood more than she'd been told and was prepared to understand more still. Deborah was on the radio managing 2 simultaneous incoming cases with the absolute fluid authority of someone in full command of their element. Kevin Torres was at the computer updating a chart, young and focused, and carrying the specific quiet intensity of someone who had been somewhere hard before this and brought it back with them into every shift. The room was full of people doing the work. Her people, her floor, her program, 3 hours old, 12 hospitals to build, 11 years of buried truth finally surfacing, and a Monday morning ahead of her that looked nothing like the Monday she had dreaded 3 days ago. She walked to the nurse's station and picked up a chart and started reading, and the ER moved around her, and the monitors ran their steady rhythms, and somewhere upstairs, an admiral was reading things on a tablet he wasn't supposed to have, and somewhere in a federal holding facility, a man who had signed an authorization and called it calculated risk, was sitting in a room with no windows and nowhere left to hide. And Lena Carter, Elena Reyes, combat medic, 3 deployments, 47 documented, saved sole survivor of Operation Hollow Ground, director of the National Crisis Medical Response Initiative, and ER nurse at Riverside Memorial, on a Monday morning read the chart and noted the patient's vitals, and felt the particular alignment of a person who has stopped running from who they are and started running toward what they can do. She had hidden long enough. She was done being small. And the work, the real work, the work that had always been waiting for her, was just beginning.